Hey fans, so here we are loaded up on the Donner Pass route, and sitting in front of us we have Southern Pacific's Cab Forward locomotive. It's quite an older locomotive from Dovetail Games, but as I revisited it recently in an attempt to see if I could actually make some improvements to it, I noticed that it's a lot more detailed than I gave it credit for when I originally ran this locomotive back before I really understood how to run steam locomotives. So before we even go into the changes that I've made, I just want to point out a couple things on this locomotive that I think are noteworthy. So one thing is that the mechanical lubricators are completely animated, so you have the actuating rods coming off the valve gear, and also the throttle is animated as well. So as I open up on the throttle and shut it off, this throttle linkage actually moves, which is really neat. So, now onto the changes that I've made. First and foremost, I have replaced the bell and the whistle. So the bell is now actually a recording of a bell that came off a Southern Pacific Cab Forward. The whistle is a recording of a Southern Pacific 6-chime whistle that's been pitch altered to be as close as possible to what the pitch of the whistle would have sounded like under 250 pounds operating pressure of steam, which is what these locomotives ran under. Now, as for the physics property changes, I've lowered the total tractive effort somewhat. The tractive effort was initially set a bit high, well over 137,000 pounds total effort, which is way higher than the rated effort of this locomotive, which is 124,300 pounds. So what I did was I lowered that tractive effort down to about 130,000 pounds, which gives you a little bit of margin, since 124,000 pounds is calculated with an 85% mean effective pressure value. And very often these newer locomotives achieve a higher mean effective pressure than 85% of boiler pressure. So I think 130,000 pounds starting tractive effort is reasonable. Now, an interesting thing to note is that when this locomotive was developed, it was set up as a tank engine. So by default, there's not actually any fuel or water in the tender of this locomotive. It's actually located in the front unit of the locomotive here. So what I did was I changed that setup. So I untanked both units of the locomotive, the front and the rear. And I put the fuel in the tender. So the locomotive now runs as a normal steam locomotive, which I think actually makes it run a little bit better, because now the front unit and the rear unit are both drawing fuel and water from the tender, and the rear unit of the locomotive is controlled by the automatic fireman, which makes sure that it doesn't run out of water or fuel. So the issues that people have been having with the locomotive running out of water, I think it's about like 30 or 40 minutes in, that should be eliminated. I haven't actually done a full multi-hour test with this thing yet, so I don't know if that is the case, but ultimately that is my goal, is to get rid of that error, and this is one of those ways that I'm going to try to do that. So I will certainly let you know if if it isn't the case. I will go ahead and take a look again and see if I can try some other fixes to remedy that issue. But enough of me jabbering on. Why don't we roll this locomotive out and see what it can do. So a lot of people ask what that noise is, that pew-pew noise that comes from this locomotive. The cab-forward locomotives were, as far as I'm aware, the only locomotives that were designed where the air compressor actually exhausts directly into the air. So that's the noise that you hear, and you can see when that actually happens, you will see a puff of exhaust steam leave these two little tiny stacks here, which are the exhaust stacks for the air compressor. Another thing that I really like about this locomotive in terms of animation is that in addition to the throttle animation and the mechanical lubricator animations, the windows and the hatches are also animated on the exterior. So if I open the windows in the cab, the windows on the exterior open as well. As you can see, the windows have opened, so that's nice. So normally I would run this locomotive with the brake handle in the running position, but there's a bit of a sound issue with the brake shoe sound. If you run with the brake handle in the running position, the sound of the brake shoes rubbing up against the wheel rim plays for some reason, which shouldn't be the case. So I'm gonna probably, as part of this mod update, I'll probably go into that sound control file and try to change the control value for that sound from the position of the brake handle to the state of the brake cylinders, which is how that is controlled in a lot of other stuff. So that should be a pretty easy fix. So coupled up to the tender drawbar, we have 23 loaded Pacific Fruit Express reefers, plus a caboose. Total train weight is, I would say, I think it's 1,900 tons, which is what the cab forward would be rated for over a 3% ruling grade. Of course, if you watched my video on the GS4 booster going over Column Pass, I went over how to calculate rated tonnage over ruling grade for any given locomotive, and we'll just go over that really quick again. So each percent of gradient adds 20 pounds of resistance. Level gradient default value is 4 pounds of resistance per ton. So 3% ruling grade means you have 3 times 20, which is 60, plus the base of 4, so total resistance on a ruling grade of 3.0% is 64 pounds per ton. Then you take your starting tractive effort and divide that by the resistance. So it's 124,300 pounds of starting tractive effort divided by 64, which yields, I want to say, it's like 1,960 something. Alright, so it's actually 1,942 tons is the absolute maximum that you could pull with this. So our train weight of 1,900 tons today is slightly less than what this would be able to pull over a 3% grade, which means we should be able to make about 15 miles an hour over said grade, which is not bad. Maximum speed of this locomotive is 60 to 65 miles an hour. Would not recommend exceeding that. I mean, you're really not going to be able to exceed that anyway, not with the train that you're handling right now. So you might have noticed that as I'm switching between the F4 HUD and the F5 HUD, the values displayed in terms of our water level in the boiler are different. So I believe that's due to the fact that we're running as technically a steam doubleheader, since our front engine unit and rear engine unit on this locomotive are considered separate locomotives. So what the heads-up display is trying to do is it's trying to create like sort of an average or something between the two locomotives, so you should probably, I believe the F4 display displays the rear unit for some reason, and the F5 display displays either an average or the front unit. So what you really want to do is every couple of minutes or so, especially when you're working the locomotive very hard, you're going to want to switch over to that F5 heads-up display and just double check your boiler water level. Make sure you don't have to run the injector. So what I think we'll do is we'll take this locomotive all the way up to Bowman, and then we'll call it a day there. That should give us us a good enough demonstration for this locomotive today and the mod pack that I've made for it. Ideal fire mass for this locomotive is 80%, so that's about where you want to keep it if you need to keep boiler pressure up. So as you might have noticed, this locomotive uses up water very quickly. So if you're planning on running this for any sort of extended period of time, you want to make sure that the route that you're running it on has a lot of mainline water spouts along the way. Otherwise, you will most likely not make it to the other end of the line before running out of water. So we're a bit slow right now. The consist I made for this run is actually 3 cars longer than it really should be. They never really assigned more than 20 loaded fruit cars with any single cab forward going over the pass. So with my luck, I'll make it right over to level track just before we stall out, hopefully. Maybe we can actually make it to Bowman. Alright, yeah, so we're probably gonna stall. Like I said, I made this consist a tad bit too long. I really should have kept it closer to 20 and 21 cars. If I were to drop the car off now, we could probably make it to the next control point. But I think I'll just let it stall, and once it stalls, I'll just end the video. So we'll see what happens. The reason for the stall, even though we're technically under the rated tonnage for this locomotive, is probably because of the physics of the drag coefficients and the rolling friction of the freight cars. You have to remember that a lot of the older equipment, the axles were plain bearing axles, not roller bearing. So the starting resistance of plain bearings were a lot harder than roller bearings. So that's gonna affect how much a locomotive can haul up any given grade. Alright, so I am cheating a little bit. I cut off the rear 3 cars. And as you can see, we are picking up speed. So I really should only be running this locomotive up this grade with 20 reefers plus a caboose. Let us keep a decent speed going up eastbound anyway. And we come to the first of many reasons along this line that spawned the inception of the cab forward locomotive. Alright, so with this shot, I will leave you folks. As always, all the information you need is going to be in the description, so please do read it. And feel free to ask any questions in the comments section. Until next time, see ya.